welcome everyone. I'm really excited to obviously host this Edge event today. Just by way of introduction for those that don't know me, my name is Rachel. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Work 180, so I will be your facilitator for our Edge event today, which I'm absolutely delighted by. So just a little bit about Work 180, because some of you on this event today might be new to Work 180, so I just thought it would be really great just to give you an overview of who we are. So we're on a mission. We're on a mission to empower every woman to choose a workplace where they can thrive. So as an advocate for working women, we provide applicants with a directory of endorsed employers who support diversity, inclusion, and equality. And we share this information on our platform. So job seekers can actively view and see the next organisation that aligns with their values and what they're looking for to enable them to thrive. And a little bit about the Edge events, because again, I'm very mindful that some of you might be really new to our Edge events. So I thought I would just take you through what these are and why we set them up. So Edge stands for Executives Driving Gender Equality. And we really want this to be seen as a leadership movement. So for us, it's really important that we are tackling the topics and the issues that matter most right now, and how we can really help organisations and employers and the world to embark on their journey of diversity and inclusion and support them and encourage them in any ways we can. So the Edge is really a think tank, and it consists of an executive panel of proactive industry leaders that are selected for their drive, their collective experience, and their ability to move the dial on gender equality. Hence who we're being joined by today, because we feel that some of these have really nailed it, no pressure to our panel. And that's why we're just absolutely delighted to bring them into the conversation today to support some of these conversations around this really important topic. So why are we here today? So the topic that we're going to be discussing is how to sell employer value propositions to stakeholders. And the key topics that's include, just to refresh your memories from the invitation that you would have received, is how to position the importance of diversity and inclusion initiatives, particularly for the C-suite, because we know that they obviously have a pivotal role to play in the importance of getting these initiatives up and running. Educate and help HR and D&I leaders to convincingly articulate ROI on employer value propositions. ROI stands for return on investment, because again, we know in this really tightening economy that we're going into and that we're in at the moment, that being able to articulate return on investment from any initiative that you want to set up right now really needs to be very convincing. Demonstrate the benefits to organisations in attracting and retaining diverse talent. For many of us on this call today, we're probably already well versed in this area, but again, I think it's really good to have a refresher and to perhaps think about some other things that we might want to take back to our C-suite. And then the potential implications if employers don't focus on this. So also, what are some of the downsides if organisations choose to deprioritise this at the moment? So we do have a lot to cover today, and we'll need to keep moving really quickly to ensure that we cover off all these areas and hopefully have some time for Q&A. So just a very quick run through of the agenda and housekeeping before I hand over to our keynote speaker today. So we'll firstly hear from Kim Burns, who's the HR manager at Penton, and she'll give us a keynote presentation. We'll then move into our panel discussion, and I will introduce the three panelists at that stage. Then we're going to move into our breakout rooms to discuss a couple of these topics in a bit more depth. Then we'll report back to the group, so we've got some really great takeaways for everyone to take back. And then we'll obviously close and get you out of here on time. So just a couple of housekeeping things very quickly. Please keep your microphones on mute if you can. If you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat box. Obviously, as I've already mentioned, great if you can have your video on, just so we know and can see all of your lovely faces. And if anyone's into hashtagging, we've got a hashtag for today, which is hashtag work180, hashtag endorsed employers for women. And maybe Nat, you can drop that into the chat channel for everyone as well, just in case people haven't got pens handy. So without further ado, I will shortly be handing you over to Kimberly Burns, who, as I mentioned, is the HR manager at Penton, who is one of our endorsed employers. So a little bit about Penton, cyber technology company, which is very interesting, rapidly grown to 80 staff. They pride themselves on innovation and building purpose-built cyber technology for defence and government. So I can only imagine how busy you are at the moment with all of the news that unfolded after the last few weeks with government hacks. The people that work at Penton are groundbreakers and visionaries. They are instigators and creators of innovation in cybersecurity technology. It sounds incredible. What an exciting place to work. And a little bit about Kim. Kim, I might not do this justice, and I'm sure you might give us all a little bit about you as well, but just for pre-read, Kim accidentally started a career in human resources over 15 years ago and has worked in both the Middle East and Australia, and has found a passion supporting businesses in startup and growth phases. As Kim tests, nothing keeps you on your toes like switching between writing recruitment copy one day and contributing to board papers and organisational strategy the next. So it sounds like a very full-on job. And Kim, we know you've got a little one on the way as well, so you'll be kept on your toes even more, I'm sure. But without further ado, Kim, I'd love to hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate, for the introduction. I'm just going to try and share a screen with you, so just forgive me as I try and share this. So thank you again, Kate, for that very good introduction. Yeah, we sound like a pretty awesome company from what you said. I'm actually, I thought I'd just share with you a little bit about our culture first. Predominantly, our culture is built on trust. We trust our people, and in turn, hopefully they trust us to do the right thing. We don't have a bunch of policies here at Penton that tell our people how to act. We hire extremely talented and capable people, and we treat each other like adults. We say internally that we're never going to make policies for the 1% who might take advantage of something, and our decisions will always be made for the 99% of people that are going to do the right thing. So I wanted to share a small snapshot of our workforce with you. I particularly think it's really important to be open and honest, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion initiatives. It's important to be aware of where you actually stand and where you want to go and design those initiatives to support that. We know that we are just at the start of our diversity and inclusion journey, and we know that we've got a long way to go. So we're really honest with ourselves. We have focused on increasing underrepresented female talent, but we know that there's so much more to creating an inclusive workplace. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of our journey. I first joined Penton nearly 18 months ago in the HR manager role, having never worked in either the IT or defence space. So I knew that I was going to have a lot to learn, but there was one thing that was really clear when I started. I was the 6th female out of 54 employees, and there was not a lot of women working at Penton. And I honestly couldn't understand why, because I have never worked in a more supportive environment with leaders that really do value flexibility and who are passionate about being better and improving the workplace. The challenges that our industry face is not unique. However, I think that Penton has some additional challenges as we straddle two industries, the IT tech and defence industry, both of which are known for its underrepresentation, particularly of female talent. A recent report last year about growing the defence industry workforce by a local Canberra company called Rapid Context had some confronting facts, which I felt like sharing with you today. On the screen just there. So, less than 1 in 5 defence industry employees are women, compared to a national average of 1 in 2. We have less than 1 in 7 managers in the defence industry companies are women, compared to 1 in 7 nationally. So we know as an industry we've got a lot of work to do. But here internally at Pen 10, we didn't just want to design people initiatives to attract and retain women, because we know that in order for there to be more equality in the workplace, there needs to actually be equality across our society, especially when it comes to unpaid care work and caring responsibilities. You know, we know that men continue to take less than 5% of parental leave in Australia, which leaves the caring responsibilities largely to women, which in turn holds our gender progress back. Reports from the Workplace Gender Inequality Agency tells us that in Australia, women spend substantially more time on unpaid care work than men, and that this unequal distribution reinforces the gender stereotypes and the inequalities in the labour market. So with all of this research, with all of these evidence-based articles, we realised that our people practices needed to reflect what we were currently offering at Pen 10, but also where we wanted to go. We decided we wanted to be the leaders in our space and really challenge not only ourselves, but our peers to raise their standards. We are still what I would consider, you know, a small startup company of 80 people. And we thought, if we're able to do this, why can't we challenge anybody else? And really, when developing these initiatives, we focused on what we could do to make a difference in the wider community. Our first thought wasn't immediately about how can we get more females into Pen 10. It was a company, and how can we put people practices in place that are truly going to support not just our people, but will also have a positive impact on their families and their communities. And we knew that we just needed to start being bold and being a leader in this space. So how did we choose our initiatives? Well, besides looking at what Pen 10 were already doing informally, which was pretty awesome already, we just looked at what progressive organisations were doing globally. And we also looked at what our peers and government were doing. We basically just, you know, costed this out on a piece of paper, and we put a paper to the board of directors with our recommendations. Our paper included about half a page of evidence-based research and facts that I've shared with you earlier. And the rest was just the recommendations of what we think we can do to be better. So these were the recommendations that we put to our board of directors. You can see them on the screen there. The one that I am most proud of and I think really makes a difference is our parental leave policy of 26 weeks paid parental leave, regardless of gender, regardless of your caring responsibilities. You know, we don't have any primary or secondary carer rules. We don't have any rules that you can only take it, you know, when your partner's gone back to work. You know, we want you to take it however you need to within the first 2 years. If that is 1 month when Bub's born, if that is spread out over the 2 years, whatever works for you. We've also looked at paying super while people are on unpaid parental leave up to 12 months. We've also got our unlimited paid sick and carers leave, which is pretty amazing. Our unlimited paid family and domestic violence leave, our unlimited paid reservist leave, professional development leave, and support in sort of flexible term time working arrangements. So, you know, quite bold initiatives to put in a paper to the board of directors 3 months after I started working there. And I do remember discussing this paper before we put it forward with Sarah Bailey, who is our CFO and, you know, all round just awesome boss, mentor to work with. And I remember that we were discussing it, and we actually ended up censoring ourselves, and we decided to reduce the amount of paid parental leave that we had in our board paper back down to sort of your standard 12 weeks, just because we just thought, oh, it's not going to be approved. No one else in our industry really is doing it. You know, very few companies in Australia are offering this. And so I walked away, fixed up the paper, and then about an hour later, I remember walking back into her office and sort of saying, oh, you know, we really don't believe that 12 weeks is the right thing to offer, though. And, you know, we know that's not being the best. So why don't we put forward what we think is the best and we just see what happens? And I remember Sarah sort of looking at me and saying, I was just thinking the exact same thing. Let's do it. So Sarah was our executive sponsor at the board, and I was really, really nervous about, you know, the outcome of this, because in previous organisations, I've tried to implement these sort of supportive people initiatives that, as HR and D&I professionals, you know, we all know that they lead to better engagement, higher productivity, lower retention. We know this to be true, but there is always so many excuses as to why it's not possible to do this. There's a lot that has been said and there's a lot that's unsaid, I believe. And, you know, I've heard some, and I'm sure you've all got stories about what you've heard, but I've heard we can't afford it. Why are we paying people to go have babies? We're just going to pay for that role twice. It's just to support women. What do the men get out of this? People will take advantage of this generosity, so we can't do it. We can't trust our people to do the right thing. So needless to say, I was really curious if Pen 10 really did walk the talk, or if it's all just a bit lip service. And I was so excited when Sarah came back and she said it was really one of the easiest things to discuss at the board. They talked for about 5 minutes about our recommendations and gave them a big tick of approval, and then they spent the remaining time talking about how important it was and what else can we be doing to be better for our people. And I know when Sarah came back from that meeting, I just felt so confident in our executive and our board that they really did want to make a difference and be better. And so at the end of that, we had 7 executive sponsors sign on and board approval for these people initiatives. So broad approval from sort of the leadership team at Pen 10. So what was the result of this? Well, personally, after coming down from the massive high of getting approval and finding like I found the perfect company, I worked with our CEO to start communicating this broadly to our people. So we did, you know, we announced it through a company-wide email, and then we talked about these initiatives in our fortnightly get-together when we could get together, which I know we all probably miss greatly. I had lots of people come up to me afterwards with individual feedback. A lot of our newer staff as well came up to me. They couldn't quite believe that this was true and were waiting to see what the caveat was around this. But I also had some feedback about these initiatives that they were really focused on families. And what about our people internally that weren't at that stage in life or didn't have children or had grown-up children? And we, of course, had supportive arrangements in our people practices, but it was a lesson for me to remember to be inclusive in our communication and not just focus on sort of a particular segment of our workforce. So we implemented these in August last year, so almost a year ago, and we've had 3 men take parental leave and 1 even deciding to take parental leave part-time over 12 months. So that he could do the the pick-up and drop-offs of the school year, which is great. And we've had 1 woman. And I know of 2 more women and 2 more men who will be taking this leave within the next 12 months, including me. I'm 37 weeks pregnant today. So very pleased that I was able to actually do this talk today. It was touch and go. So look, and when I've looked at our sick and carers leave as well, which I've not been directed to by our leadership team, but, you know, just the curious nature of myself has decided to look, we've reduced our sick leave overall. And I think that's because people aren't coming into work sick. They're not, you know, they're not being those heroes. And especially around the time of COVID, I know that this policy has really supported our people. We are all encouraging our people to, you know, if you have a little sniffle, to stay home, to put your family first, and knowing that you've got unlimited sick and carers leave for that, that's really made a difference. with these people practices, we've been trying to create a more equal workplace where that men feel just as supported as women to take these leave. We've also received feedback from our candidates that we've interviewed that these initiatives are attractive and one of the reasons that they want to talk to us. And it's not just been women saying that as well, it's also been our men candidates as well. So we're hoping that these initiatives not just attract people to join Pen 10, but we want them to stay with us. We want them to know that they're supported. We want them to know that they're a part of a family and that we're going to support them regardless of their individual circumstances. So just a few lessons learned through this journey. Honestly, the number one lesson for me, leadership is everything. I have been so lucky that our leadership team knew that this was the right thing to do. So it actually wasn't a question of convincing them. It was a question of, well, what are we going to do? I was also so lucky to have strong advocates in our CFO, Sarah, our director, John, and our CEO, Matthew. And honestly, they still continue to push me every day to make Pen 10 a better place to work, which is a challenge that I absolutely love. And another lesson for me is about consultation. So we didn't actually consult with our staff, with our people when we put forward these initiatives, which, as a HR person is the opposite of what I sort of tell people that we need to do. I think I just got so excited. I was like, oh, let's do all these amazing things. But we were really open and honest in receiving their feedback. And we made adjustments and we changed our communication, as I mentioned before, about not just supporting families, but highlighting how these practices support people across the business. One example of how we did that was we have an initiative to support term time working. And I have to thank Deloitte for that inspiration, because that's where I saw it from. And that's where you're paid at 0.8 FTE for the duration of the year, but that you work full time during the term and you have the school holidays off without needing to take any annual leave. So we changed that, how we spoke about that internally, to say that this arrangement could be used by anyone. It didn't have to be just families of school-age children, but if you wanted more time to travel more during the school holidays, or if you wanted to work on a side project, that we would support you with those flexible arrangements. I do wonder if we did consult with our people beforehand, would we have come up with such progressive and bold ideas, or if during the process itself we would have washed it back because collectively maybe we would have held ourselves back to what we're used to seeing. So I don't have the answer to that, but it is interesting and just something I think about sometimes. So I'm almost done, but as mentioned, we're at the start of our journey here at Pen 10, but I'm just so determined to keep pushing us forward as a company and also just as an industry to be a better place to work for our people. Now, that's kind of it from me. I'm going to hand back to Kate and see if she's got any questions, or if anyone has any questions around that. But thank you for letting me share our journey here at Pen 10. I will miss it. I will be on 6-month parental leave and then utilising some return to work leave to come back part-time. And I honestly just can't wait to come back to work and see how far Pen 10 has moved in the next 6 months. So thank you for having me. Work 180.
Thank you, Kim. That was fantastic.
I'll stop sharing.
Great case study. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I actually wrote down 3 sentences. I think
I saw you do that.
All for me. I was like, be bold, be challenging, be better. So I think 3 things that I've kind of taken away from that presentation that's kind of been really instilled in me. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to introduce you to the panelists today. So we have Nate Domenico, who is the Senior Manager for Employer Branding, Diversity and Inclusion at Carlton and United Breweries. Julie Moss, who is the Diversity and Inclusion and Wellbeing Manager for Corporate Services at Transgrid. And Nilesh Singh, who is the General Manager of Employee Experience at Origin. So, Nilesh, I'm going to start with you. My first question. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that the COVID pandemic has raised for Origin in terms of diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Afternoon all. Thanks. Looking forward to the conversation today. Look, COVID is an interesting one because I think we're learning and unlearning as we go along. But just over the last few months, I think we are probably no different in terms of what our organizations are kind of going through. But so my personal experiences has been that flexible working can work, and we've had 6 months of it. That's a real positive. And look, it's important because Origin already had a high participation of flexible working. In fact, 75% of our employees over the last 12 months had accessed some form of flexible working. I think what's important is that the male take-up and the experience of this has been a bit of a game changer because it does changes the narrative from pre to post, which is something we can discuss further in the breakout sessions. I think from an inclusion perspective, it's been very important because it's created some additional disciplines that may not have existed in a physical sense. So a lot more focus on one-on-ones, a lot more focus on asking questions that is non-work related between managers and employees. A lot of peer support between employees as well around solving problems and challenges, etc. I mean, sometimes parental experiences can be better shared amongst employees better than what a PNC function could offer. So we're starting to see a lot of that happening. I think the format that we've got this meeting in Zoom or Teams, etc. That technology has also allowed people to kind of get a voice and not feel intimidated in a meeting setting, etc. Look, there are lots of challenges as well, or opportunities. We need to define the role of PNC and what we do. The onset of mental health challenges, financial pressures, really understanding the challenges of an essential worker, parents looking after kids at home, etc. But can I say, though, it hasn't stopped or knocked off any of our D&I activities, of course, because yesterday we launched our Gender Affirmation Leave, which is on the back of our Pride initiative that was launched during the lockdown period. Last week, we launched our Good Energy Moments program, which is our reward and recognition program. And just over through the lockdown period, we've delivered a range of initiatives, including our Skillshare program, even our People Leadership program. So this is in addition to all the chairs and monitors, etc. we've been sending to our employees at home. So it hasn't sort of stopped us, but at the same time, we need to be on top of what each new day kind of brings, and particularly in Victoria, the next 6 weeks will be quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. First question for you. Do you think COVID has moved the dial in terms of demonstrating the importance and the significance of EVP to C-suiters?
I think the exec have always known that it's important from an academic perspective, but now we have a workforce who don't really want to go back to the way it was now that they've experienced flexibility. So men are experiencing working from home in ways that many were prevented from doing previously. Now, when I say prevented, they weren't prevented through policies, they were prevented through culture. So we always saw in all the companies I've worked at, seen more women take up flexible work options than men. So this is the big change. So in terms of moving the dial, yes, that's a big game changer. So with such a widespread tide of desire now for those flexible working conditions, there is more awareness that change will have to happen if companies are going to keep up with the competition. So I know our executives are very keen to keep moving forward, but I know that they're very keen to also see what everybody else is doing as well, because the competition for talent is only going to get stronger. So previously, I think we had a bit more of an internal focus before COVID. What are we doing for our people and making sure that we're doing the right thing? And we had some great policies in place, and there was a good take up, similar to Origin. But now it's become less about managers giving individuals the permission to work from home. Now it's just been one of these things that we've all had to do, and so we're just seeing what lands. But certainly now that external focus on, well, what's everybody else doing as well, and also a focus on what office space we need for this as well. So there are those sorts of questions to be decided on. It's not just they're all people questions, but they're questions now about, are our offices in the right location? Do we have too much space? And I know that's a query for a lot of people as well.
So just out of curiosity then, Julie, given that you're immersed in this world, 24/7, what are some of the trends that you think we're going to start seeing emerge now as a result of COVID? You talk about that external lens, so you might already be sort of mapping out what you're thinking the future trends might be, and, enabling that within Transgrid to be a competitive employer of choice.
Well, certainly activity-based working is much higher on the agenda. We were sort of semi there anyway, because we have a number of different offices too in the metropolitan area and the rest around country New South Wales. So people did travel a little bit between the two, and wanted to between offices and work a little bit flexibly. But now it's a case of looking at, for example, suburban hubs. So that people can go into the office that is a local hub in a suburb near them, so that they can meet up with colleagues locally without having to come into that central hub, which is Sydney. Also, we've been hiring people remotely. So since COVID started, we've hired 120 people, all of them remote. None of them have ever been into our office. So we do all our inductions online, the whole piece. And that's where, Work 180, we have our little piece on there about, we hire people remotely, because now we're getting talent from much further afield than just Sydney metropolitan area. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, wow. That's incredible that you've onboarded that many people in such a short space of time.
Crazy.
So what advice would you give those on the webinar today that are perhaps struggling a little bit to get the executive buy-in they need in order to push forward with their D&I strategy? Because unfortunately, to Kim's example, we might not always be in organisations that are so open-minded to some of the D&I initiatives that we feel are important to our staff. So any tips, tricks or advice for those that are struggling with some of these conversations?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't, to be completely honest, I wouldn't have said that we were overly open originally. So where it's come from is our board originally wanted to work with, to do some D&I initiatives, and this is 2.5 years ago. So that we were starting from scratch. So when they said to their executive team, okay, hire a D&I manager, which was me, work out what you need to do and get on with it. So they hired me, but of course the board were very on board, but the exec team had their hearts in the right place but didn't know what that actually meant. So for them, a lot of the thinking was a little bit along that patriarchal thinking of what do we need to do for our women to increase more women into the company. So they were looking at in terms of higher parental leave for women and more flexibility for women. And I said, no, actually, it's about the men. It's about giving men equality on parental leave, men equality on the flexibility, because once you've got that equality, then there's not going to be, it's a level playing field. So when you've got a manager, whether they hire a hiring manager thinking of, do we hire a woman or do we hire a man? There's none of that unconscious bias around, well, the woman might go off and have a child, because now the man or the woman can, or the man or the woman can also have that flexibility. And so what we've seen now with COVID is that's actually worked in practice, where we've got some very senior men saying, I am not going back into the office. This is amazing. And there's me saying, well, all this research has been there for the last 20 years, and now you're seeing it in action. So I'm using this to point out all the benefits that we're getting from this ability to work remotely.
Yeah, very interesting. Nilesh, I might ask you that same question. So could you perhaps give us some examples of how you've engaged your C-suite and executive leadership teams to bring them on that journey internally at Origin to ensure that they're signing off on the initiatives that you deem are important for the organisation?
Look, I'll speak a bit more generically here because I think we've been on this journey for about 4 years now. So a lot of the heavy lifting has been kind of done in terms of making the case for change. For us in Origin, we one of the dimensions is really around governance. We have what we call a people committee, which is made up of our senior execs. They provide a lot of the strategy, direction, and the funding for what we call the Origin People Plan, which is an enterprise-wide prioritized set of activities that effectively underpin our D&I activities. So things like our leadership program, Pride, Reconciliation Action Plan, Working Parents Program, etc., all a part of that. We also have targets and KPIs that is built into our performance scorecards, etc. So the People Committee has a strong vested interest in making sure that there is a clear return. The execs also champion initiatives. So, for example, Frank Calabria, CEO, champions REP. Our head of retail champions Pride. So, we make sure that executives have a part to play in driving that strong top-down focus. We partner, just like with Work 180 as an example, we also partner with organizations like Women Leadership Australia. Through the symposiums, we make sure that the executives are present in terms of talking about our D&I story. But there's also another aspect that's important as well, because there are some initiatives that are led bottom up, and Pride is a great example, which started off as a small Shark Tank experiment in 2016 that just became a movement, which the executives then embraced through the People Plan, and that is something now they drive. COVID has been interesting as well because one thing we've seen is strong senior and exec visibility through the period, and our CEO has been really front and center in terms of driving that well-being, that presence, and in terms of really supporting a range of initiatives, whether it be pandemic leave or well-being initiatives, etc. So it hasn't been a problem in that sense. So I think from a cultural transformation perspective, we're well into that maturity phase. I think for us, it's really making sure that we focus on those things that are relevant and that really hit the audience or employee base. That in terms of resonating and making sure that we keep on refreshing the things that are really important at this point in time.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I know that Origin, are doing such great stuff in this space, so it's really valuable to have you here sharing some of this today. Nate, to your point, how do you measure the success of your strategy at Carlton United Breweries and report back to your executive committee? So again, ensuring that they're on board, that they're on the journey with you, and that you're able to continue the business cases that you want to do in this D&I space.
Yeah. So a big part for us is it's grounded in our culture and our values. So just a good starting point is our culture is around bringing people together for a better Australia. So be that diversity and inclusion or belonging strategies or how we're reacting to things like COVID and what we're doing, it all goes back to that. I think that's really important. And like with anything, when I'm talking to the senior leaders within the business, it's imperative to have the data points and the insights. So for us, it may be around engagement scores. So actually seeing the mood and the rest of it within the business, but also what they're telling us as well, and actually use that to input back into our action plans across the business as well. Earlier this year, we actually ran a deep dive as part of our survey rhythm on diversity and inclusion and belonging as well, to actually get into more detail around what are the needs or the jobs to be done around our business. Were we actually missing a trick, or were we actually on the right track in different spaces? because I think for us, one of the tactics I've taken is fewer, bigger, better. Rather than trying to be everything to everyone or try and achieve everything, be very, targeted around what you're doing. So you actually get some runs on the board and celebrate successes, be it with senior leaders or the broader business as well.
Yeah, interesting. I know you and I have talked offline about the importance role that data plays in some of this now. And I guess we live in a very data-driven world, and executives obviously want to see what the implications are of some of the D&I initiatives from a data perspective. So what role do you think this is playing for you in terms of getting the right advocates on board to ensure success? Like, are you seeing that there's certain metrics that your team are interested in more than others? Like, is there any guidance around data that you could perhaps give to this group today that's worked for you?
Yeah, I think it's really important to identify the problem, but also go back with a solution as well. And I know with our leadership team, there's personalities in there which are quite competitive. So if what are their triggers or what are their barriers, actually use that in your favour to go back. So actually highlight what competitors are doing, be that within our industry or more broadly as well. Because at the end of the day, we've got a shared goal around retaining our talent, but also attracting the best talent in the market as well. And the market isn't necessarily for us alcohol. It's much broader, than that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So talking about competition, I guess going back to Julie's point as well, do you purposely seek out what your competitors are doing in this space and ensure that you are being as competitive when it comes to your policies?
You have to. And we definitely are. And like I said before, I don't see my competitors as being alcohol. It's, broader than that as well. It could be Telstra, it could be Woolies, it could be, a smaller business as well, because Australia is quite a competitive market. And it's really, important that we are keeping up, to my point before, around retaining talent, but also attracting the best talent as well. And I guess before we go anywhere, externally with policies or comms, we need to ensure our back of house is in order as well. There's great resources out there. So I know Kim mentioned before around the WGA report. That's great to see how you're benchmarking versus your competitive set as well. So there is plenty of data points out there, and they're great to actually benchmark yourself and go back with solutions. Another thing we do as well within with CUB is as a drinks industry. So the Drinks Association, which is all key alcohol manufacturers, actually have a group called Embrace Difference. So there's representatives from each organisation which actually meet to go through what are the challenges the industry is facing into. Because it's no good, that we're, trying to, do bits and bobs. It actually may be bigger than us. In a lot of cases, if I use gender as an example, especially within beer, which is traditionally quite masculine, there's actually jobs for the industry to work together to overcome. And D&I is definitely a space I see, great collaboration within reason across, otherwise competitors as well. So we've actually got a shared responsibility to actually, move things forward.
Yeah, that's actually really good to know. That was the first time that I've heard that, and I'm sure there'd be industries in similar spaces on this call today that could probably start to initiate some of those conversations as well.
We've worked back with the likes of Pride University. I know the construction, industry have similar, frameworks as well. So that's the opportunity as well for different sectors to actually partner back again with each other as well. So we're not, doubling down within our rabbit holes.
And overall making the world a better place, right, for people to work. I feel like we could talk on this topic all day. I know I've got a really passionate bunch of panelists here, and even our conversations offline went much longer than we had, but I've got to keep moving. So thank you very much for answering those questions today. Hopefully they gave some of our people on the call today some insights, which is fabulous. Of you, but I feel like we just scratched the surface a little bit in our group. Hopefully we'll have some takeaways at least to share with the other groups. So I'll go around and ask each of the facilitators from the groups just to share with them I guess any useful insights from the discussion that they had in their breakout rooms. So Gemma, I think you were part of one, so share with us.
I thought you were going to pick on me first. So we didn't get through to the third question because we, there was just so much to talk about. But some of the challenges that we were discussing, the first one was around the leadership team still in that mindset of meritocracy when it comes to inclusion and diversity, and how we actually break through that. The suggestions was around having pre-prepared answers, knowing that you're going to get these types of questions and really structuring those for a compelling argument. The other one was a recommendation to read the Male Champions of Change. I think it's a white paper, The Merit Trap, which is very, very interesting, that talks about the pitfalls of hiring on merit. And lastly, not hiring for the role, just hiring for the role, but also hiring for the team. If we know diverse teams are more effective, that's what you've got to talk about rather than just the right person for that particular role. We are also talking about the challenges of being government owned and having EBAs in place, which Julie has navigated, one of our panel speakers has navigated in the past, and they've got 5 unions, I think, that they have to work with, but they managed to get that through and still have the EBA policies as well as the progressive policies and allow people to choose. Yes, I got all of that right. That's good. And also leveraging, the other thing we spoke about was leveraging D&I with the leadership team to really focus on mental health and, with inclusion, obviously boosting mental health, and now being such a difficult time, it's really making a much more compelling argument as to why it needs to be a priority. And I might just stop there because I've got a whole page of notes.
Thank you. Angela, I think you were one of our other facilitators.
Hi, everybody. So we were speaking a lot about, I guess, the importance of EVP post-COVID. And I think there was a few key takeaways from that. And one thing that I didn't even think of, which was obvious, but just the importance of EVP, because people can't actually come into the office at the moment. And so because they can't experience the organisation that they're coming into, particularly people, being onboarded remotely, that videos and the EVP and stories and images and all of that is just so much more important at the moment. And that will continue in sort of this flexible sort of way of working. And also the real mindset change as a silver lining that's come away from this traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday sort of industrial model. That's completely changed sort of within the space of the last 5 months. So that is a huge win for a lot of employees and a lot of families and a lot of people. But from a real business perspective, if we use our learning from that as well, is the leveraging of technology has actually allowed for business models to really be reinvigorated and become more efficient, and the way that we do things can be more efficient and effective. So that has, brought about huge change of benefit to organisations across the world effectively. Just finally, the last piece that I thought was a really great learning from one of the businesses, Pepperstone, they're actually focusing very much on mental health first aid officers, and they've created those across all different levels within their organisation, and it's a peer-led initiative, so that again we can have more of that support for mental health initiatives. And that's another sort of post-COVID silver lining, and something that's been a really great initiative that's been brought about as well. So we do have some benefits and silver linings of this crazy time that we're all experiencing. So thank you to my team for that insight.
Thanks, Ange. Sonia?
Hello, everyone. So I guess for us, it started with a bit of a case of what is an employer value proposition at the moment. Maybe what was pre-COVID is very different. So we had an example from Origin Energy where they were ready to go on site and interview people, but obviously that can't happen. And since then, things have changed. So that's how our conversation started. And then we moved into more around, communication being clear both internally and externally. So what we're doing, how we're doing it. And we were finding that senior leaders and managers were actually humanizing themselves a bit more and, becoming more authentic. So it was the CEO of Maddox Lawyers lives on a farm, and she takes selfies with herself with the animals and the herb gardens. And, she does things like sets up different sessions during the week for all levels of staff to come in and ask questions. So and then that went on to a very important part, which is the mental well-being, which is a big focus for all the organizations at the moment, and really letting staff know about the EAP. Other things we have is utilizing skills from within. So Origin Energy, for example, have an internal Skillshare program. So they're looking for those transferable skills to help within the business, and also designing roles to fit talent that they already have. And then, I've got loads of other stuff, like a 3-page of scribble, but that's the summary.
Thank you, Sonia. Julia?
Hi, everyone. My team had topic 1, where we discussed some of the core challenges that organisations face, bringing a D&I strategy over the line, and how some of those challenges could be addressed. We didn't quite get to the quick wins. We did have sort of a semi-quick win, a medium-term win for foundation laying. So some of the things that we talked about were Kelly from Four Pines Brewery. Actually, we took it a step back. So before we even present a strategy to the board, how do we even generate awareness that D&I is important and a key factor? If we're dealing with executive leadership groups who think that things don't actually need to change, things are already going really well, so why do we need to look into this space? So looking at how can we share case studies, how can we share resources and information that actually sparks that conversation before even going through to the next stage of presenting a D&I strategy. Another thing that we talked about was being cautious about the data that we actually present. And this one was from Kim around, sometimes data can be a bit of a hindrance. Sometimes executive leadership boards will look at that data and think it's all just numbers and stats and we'll gloss over it. And it's about bringing it back to a human experience and what that actually means for us as human beings, and not just this is a set of numbers. And something else to consider is, and this is a little bit controversial from Kim, but that sometimes you may come up against boards or exec groups that will just never get it. They will never understand that D&I is an important aspect to the organisation, and sometimes you may just need to find another organisation where their values align with your own. So if you're finding that you're coming up against an exec team that aren't open-minded and open to change, that it may be an opportunity to step back and have a look at what other organisations are committed to D&I and do want to make those changes. We talked about research and putting case studies forward, and looking for, if you don't have internal D&I advocates at that leadership level that can help drive the conversation for you, to also look at engaging your networks outside of the organisation and within the industry and other industries to help build business cases and show case studies of what other organisations are doing and bring that information back. And then we talked about the competitive landscape that we're operating in, particularly with COVID now, and taking this time to look at the policies and initiatives that you have within the organisation and how they compare. We know that in most industries where there is a shortage of women, that you're dealing with a short supply of talent, and so sometimes those policies and benefits can be that key differentiator. And so taking that opportunity to present that to the board, these initiatives and policies will help drive that talent attraction and also retention piece.
Lovely. Thank you, Julia. Valeria, I think you were our last but one facilitator.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks to my group. We highlighted a number of opportunities and surprises first. So things like, using this time to do projects that may have been sitting on the back burner. For example, refreshing the careers sites, looking at the EVP. Also, Chelsea from Bendigo and Adelaide Bank shared how they refreshed their whole belonging page, or actually created one. So that was really lovely. Also talked about opportunities to redeploy people into teams to create some more diversity across those teams, which I thought is a really interesting idea. There was also surprise from Origin by the ease of things at things that people thought couldn't be done previously, and how easy it was to accomplish those, such as, moving entire workforces to working remotely and so on, which I think puts us in a really, good place to then advocate for other tests and projects after COVID. And also surprised how connected people can feel despite all being remote, which then led us into a conversation around the concern we may have for the younger demographic, which may be, working from shared accommodation, with the stress levels kind of, increased, especially in Victoria with the new lockdown, and talked about strategies for keeping them connected in particular, and also looked at the shift in focus on candidate care as well, which is always important, but it's very important right now, given that people are so vulnerable, putting themselves out there during a very stressful time. So I'll probably leave it there, but we did talk a lot more as well.
Thank you, Valeria. So our group, just to end, we probably stayed in challenge mode a little bit more than we should have without getting to too many solutions. But I guess challenges that, again, might resonate with the rest of the group here. So our policies aren't quite there yet. So how can we be, professing to the world that we want to hire all of these diversity groups if we haven't got our policies straight? Driving initiatives that don't cost money. Obviously, some employers are, in much more cost-constraining environments. Do we have our back of house right? So again, are we in culturally the right place to be bringing lots of different diversity groups into the organisation, and conflicting priorities? So for many of us, D&I might be a passion project, a side project, something that we can only get to 1 or 2 days a week. So how do we juggle that with our full-time role? So they were some of the challenges. Some of the solutions that we did get to touch on is around creating your internal ambassador network. So things that don't cost money is looking across your employees and who are great advocates for your organisation that you can be out sharing stories with across your social media to obviously bring a spotlight onto your organisation. And I think it would be fair to say analysis by paralysis. So rather than us just keep knowing that these are the challenges that we've got, actually, taking the ball and running with it and doing something effective, back to Kim's kind of original presentation, be bold, be challenging, go out there and actually make a difference. We're all in very privileged, influential positions. So I think with that, brings great power. So we must use that wisely, I think, for many of us. So that brings today's concludings to an end. Obviously, Work 180 are here to support any of you that are at the beginning of your journey or are further ahead. So please feel free to lean on us for any advice or guidance or support. This is absolutely our number one passion, is diversity and inclusion. So you're in the right place if we can help you in any way. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, Kim, for your insightful presentation. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Nilesh. And thank you, Julie, for being part of our panel. Thank you all for your time today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your days. And that's goodbye from us.